Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about transit Chiron, square, opposition, or inconjunct one's natal Jupiter. When we're talking about transits that involve Chiron, it can be about physical and emotional wounds and suffering, depleted self-esteem, self-worth, and how you feel about yourself, and also helping and healing others. Now, when transit Chiron is basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal Jupiter, well, it may manifest. Well, first, I'm going to be kind and rewind. When you have, I'm going to elaborate on when I say basically adverse aspect. Okay, squares and oppositions, of course, those aspects are adverse and negative in astrology. Now, the inconjunct aspect, though it's neutral aspect can have good and bad qualities in them, coupled with the fact that an inconjunct can often require an adjustment or transition, and that in turn can cause some exasperation and tension. So collectively, basically, I see this as an adverse transit. Now, anyway, when transit Chiron basically makes an adverse aspect to one's natal Jupiter, it may manifest in physical and emotional wounds and suffering, depleted self-esteem, self-worth, and how you feel about yourself, and also helping and healing others. Those things may conflict with the expanding horizons. If you have, say, if your natal Jupiter is in Sagittarius, it could be doing something, sports or athletics or publishing or advertising. You might be dealing with some physical trauma, or maybe there's something where you're just so depleted self-worth and self-esteem. I mean, that right there, it can cause some despondency, and when you have that going on, naturally it would be harder to expand the horizons. And remember that Jupiter is also connected with enthusiasm and exuberance, and it may be harder for you if you're dealing naturally with some emotional or physical suffering for you to be upbeat and enthusiastic about things. I mean, let's say if the natal Jupiter is in Gemini and or the third house in your chart, it can simply be matters connected with communications and short journeys. Um, and if you have this, say, if you are still in your early education, it's before college, it could even be matters connected with the early education. It could be, middle school or grade school or high school. And those things naturally can be, something where it's going to be difficult to be upbeat about if you're dealing with something, of a physical or an emotional nature at the time of this transit. Now, the thing, too, is Jupiter is also about optimism, and you may not be if you're going through, if there is some kind of physical trauma that you're contending with at this time, it might be more difficult to be optimistic regarding it. And the thing is, if you feel, and especially if it's something that you've had for a prolonged or protracted period, and if the transit Chiron right now, at the time of this video, is in Aries, as most of you may know, I'm sure, and it can be, issues, if it's transit Chiron in Aries, it can be issues, with the face or the head, the skull. It could be migraine, it could be persistent headaches, or even some trauma with the brain in some isolated cases. Now, another thing is that Jupiter is also connected with the truth and veracity. And at the time of this transit, you may have difficulty in saying perhaps the truth in what could be actually causing the emotion, and if there's any kind of emotional suffering that you could be going through at this point in time, and what the actual reason is. If you have the transit Chiron in the fourth house as an example, it could be some issues with the home or the family life, or someone close to home with. Maybe you're just not wanting to see what's actually going around with going on with these people at this time. It's kind of like, maybe you might be somewhat delusional, or trying to see, not trying to see the negative in what's actually transpiring. But this is something where it is difficult, and wanting to actually acknowledge the truth and what suffering you may be going through, if you are going through any at the time of this transit. Now, another thing is that Jupiter is also connected with the law. And the thing is, if you've ever been embroiled in any problems, with the law, and committed, any crimes, if there's some, criminal, background, and say if you weren't able to get it expunged, as an example, this is where there might be more suffering in connection with that. And say if you're trying to apply, you're trying to apply for a job or something, and you got, say, for example, if you got laid off your present job due to some kind of termination, due to workforce reduction or something, and then you try to go somewhere else, it might be something where there might be more difficulty in trying to attain, some position, because it could be something with, a background that might be coming up that might cause, some difficulty with that. And also, too, anatomically speaking, Jupiter is connected with the liver, the sciatic nerve, thighs, and hips, and even obesity. So it can be a time, too, if you've had any of these issues that I just described that are anatomically connected with Jupiter, it might be more suffering as a result of it at this time. If you are going through, if there's something going on with excessive weight gain or obesity, it might be something where it might be causing more, like an energy level, or it might be some more suffering as a result of it. It could be something too, at this time. And also keep in mind, again, Chiron is connected with helping and healing others, so it could cause a conflict in you actually trying to help and heal other people at this time. So, and that is where, if you are experiencing anything anatomically connected with Jupiter that I just described before. Now, another thing too is that Jupiter is also connected with jocularity, joviality. And obviously, if you're going through, if there's any physical suffering or emotional suffering or feelings of ineptitude somewhere in your life, it's going to be harder to be more upbeat and be more humorous, and to joke about things. And it might be harder to make light of what is actually happening. If there is some serious issues you're going through, that where there's some kind of emotional suffering, in some isolated cases it could even be some abuse that somebody is dealing with, whether it's on a physical or an emotional level, it may be harder to actually be more jovial at this time, more so than usual. And Jupiter is also connected with higher education. And the thing is, it might be where, if there's something, with higher, education, where you're in college and if you're studying excessively, it might be causing, there might be some more issues in terms of, could be something of a physical related nature. It might be something where, if you're dealing with, I should say, if there's something physical that you're contending with at this time, it might make it harder to pursue matters in connection with college and higher education. At this time, say if transit Chiron's in Gemini, it could be some issues with the arms, the hands, the nerves, or some issues with breathing or the lungs that might cause more difficulty in doing things that are college related at this time. Jupiter is also connected with traveling abroad, so it could be a situation, again, going back to the physical related issues, that if you're dealing with some at this time, naturally it would be harder to travel abroad, or you might be dealing, with some, situation on an emotional level, where, you're going through some emotional suffering, or people are asking you to assist them and help them in some, dilemma. It may be more difficult to actually travel abroad at this time, more so than usual. So anyway, now, another way this transit may manifest, it could be where you may be difficulty in helping and healing others due to long distance traveling. Now, let's say if natal Jupiter is in Pisces, for example, it could be a sea voyage. It could be a fantasy island, I should say a fantasy trip, going to the place maybe you dreamt of, and you're actually, going there at this time. Could be a place you thought was unattainable in terms of actually traveling to. Also, too, physical or emotional wounds may make it difficult. Again, I'm going to reiterate what I said previously, may make it more difficult to be jocular or humorous. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, say for example, if the natal Jupiter is in Taurus, maybe it's something with body or the bathroom humor, so to speak. And also, depleted self-esteem may adversely affect your enthusiasm and exuberance at this time. Now, let's say again, using Jupiter and Sagittarius as an example, it could be something having that enthusiasm perhaps for sports, adventure, exploration, the outdoors, publishing or advertising, and that you might not quite have the enthusiasm for that due to perhaps depleted self-worth at this time. Now, also too, the pain that runs deepest, which is Chiron, may have a negative impact on you in terms of expanding your horizons, which is Jupiter. For example, let's say if the Chiron transit Chiron is in it's in Aquarius, you might feel maybe there's some ostracism going on, or you're feeling condemned by society, and it might be causing some difficulty in you being upbeat and trying to expand your horizons and going outside the box, so to speak. Now, another thing too is that there could also be some issues where you might be. I mean, Jupiter can be about exaggeration and distortion. There might be a situation where there might be a greater propensity during this transit, perhaps to exaggerate, which is Jupiter, physical and emotional suffering you might be dealing with at this time. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.